Once upon a time, there lived a 40-year-old man who still lived in his parents' house. He was not yet married, and yet he believed his parents owed him a good life. "You brought me into this world. It's your responsibility to buy me a car and pay all of my bills," he yelled one evening at his old mother, who stood there, tired of watching her own son waste his life, whilst his mates were already fathers, husbands and providers of their respective families. His name was Raymond, and he was tall, healthy and completely capable of working. However, he convinced himself that he had no reason to work. After all, his parents were rich and provided all that he ever needed. To Raymond, no one could afford to pay him enough to abandon his soft life. His mother secured a job that offered to pay him 1 million naira monthly, but required him to work 10 hours daily. But Raymond loved his sleep too much to accept. After all, his parents provided him with a card that always had money to spend. So why would he inconvenience himself daily, just to make the money that he spent without even working a day in his life? Raymond was not cut out for that life. He was the only son and heir to all that his parents ever owned. All Raymond wanted was to party and get drunk. His parents tried to link him up with several women who they believed would impact his life positively, but Raymond was too full of himself. He talked down on women and saw them as less than himself because in his mind, money was all that mattered, and he, Raymond, had plenty of it without even lifting a finger. He arrived at one of his dates an hour late and still had the audacity to shout at the woman on the phone for leaving the restaurant before he arrived. "How dare you waste my precious time?" he said to the young woman, who blinked in shock to hear such arrogance coming from a man who believed the world revolved around him. The woman gave him a piece of her mind as she hung up the call and blocked his number. Raymond went on several dates with other women who either found him to be distasteful or arrogant. Raymond ordered one of the women to kneel down and wipe his shoes after she mistakenly stepped on it during their date. Raymond even went as far as abandoning one of his dates at the park after she refused to follow him to a nearby hotel after their first date. Raymond only cared about himself. He didn't care that his attitude was now affecting his old parents. In fact, Raymond could not wait for his parents to die. He shared all their properties in his head, waiting patiently for them to die to inherit all that they had ever worked for. One night, however, Raymond went clubbing. As usual, he drank heavily, laughed loudly, and sprayed money that belonged to his wealthy parents. He had the habit of spending lavishly at the club and was offended when a woman who he approached ignored him despite knowing how wealthy he was. His pride could not take the rejection as Raymond began to humiliate the poor woman at the club. He called her all forms of belittling names and even threatened to deal with her. The entire club erupted in chaos as the club security stepped in to get everything under control. Raymond was asked to leave as the young woman turned out to be the younger sister of the owner of the club. By the time he staggered out of the club, the music still pounding in his head, Raymond was drunk beyond reason. He jumped into his expensive car and sped off, ignoring traffic lights and curses from pedestrians. As he was driving recklessly, an old man suddenly crossed in front of his car. Raymond slammed the brakes just in time as the old man stumbled back, shocked and petrified. Raymond could not contain his anger in that moment. "Are you mad?" he yelled, stepping out of the car as he approached the old man, who stood there frozen from the shock. "Can't you see where you're going? You poor foolish man. If I hit you now, they will say I have used you for money ritual," he said to the old man, who dusted himself quietly and looked at Raymond, who continued to speak, saying that the man was so lucky that nothing happened to his car. Raymond called him all sorts of unprintable names as the old man warned him to mind how he spoke. "Be careful how you speak to me," he said to Raymond, who gave him a very hot slap across his face and threatened him to do his worst. Raymond got into his car and drove off, not caring the pain that he had caused the old man. Minutes later, he arrived home and staggered straight to bed. Raymond fell into a very deep sleep, a kind of sleep that looked far from normal. He woke up finally to find himself in a strange house. Raymond opened his eyes and the first thing that welcomed him was heat. The room was so small, cramped and poorly ventilated. The ceiling above him was cracked and a weak fan struggled noisily in the corner. Raymond could not understand what was happening. He sat up confused as he began to yell out for help. "This is not my room," he muttered as he stood up and looked around. There were no paintings on the wall, no air conditioner, no king-size bed, just a thin mattress on the floor and a plastic chair sitting in the corner. "Mommy!" he called out, his voice suddenly unsure as a woman walked in, wearing a faded wrapper and a tired expression on her face. "Yes, my son," she answered as Raymond froze. She looked like his mother, but poorer. Her hands were rough, her eyes sunken like one who had never tasted luxury in her lifetime. "What is this place? Where is our mansion?" Raymond asked sharply as his mother laughed loudly as if he had just cracked the joke. "Mansion?" she asked. "Which mansion, my son? This is the only house we have ever lived in." Raymond's heart began to race. He rushed outside. There was no gate, no security men, no cars parked outside, just a small compound with bare earth and drying clothes hung on a rope. His father sat outside on a wooden stool, repairing an old radio. "Papa!" Raymond shouted. "What happened to our money, our cars, our houses?" The old man looked up slowly. "My son, you talk like someone who doesn't know his family. Money? Since when did we have money? When we barely have enough to eat," he said to Raymond, whose world almost collapsed. "What do you mean we don't have money?" Raymond whispered. "What about the cars, the houses, the businesses?" His father sighed deeply and shook his head. "My son," he said calmly, "I don't understand what is happening with you. You have never been rich. I'm a retired school teacher, and your mother here sells vegetables in the market. What mansion are you talking about?" he said to Raymond, who staggered back into the house, his chest tight with rage as he wondered what the hell was happening. Was he in an alternate universe, or was this a nightmare? He thought to himself as he locked himself in the small room and sat on the tin mattress, his head in his hands, as so many thoughts ran through his mind. "How did I get here?" he muttered to himself as his poor mother walked into the room to speak with him. "Raymond," she said gently, "are you not going to work?" "Work?" Raymond repeated slowly, lifting his head up in confusion. "What work, Mama?" he asked his mother, who looked at him like someone who had just lost his senses. "Raymond, are you sure you are okay? Since you woke up from your sleep, you have been acting strange," she said to Raymond, who asked to know where he worked. "The car wash, of course," she replied. "You work at the local car wash now. If you don't go, they will deduct your pay," she said to Raymond, whose eyes widened in horror. "Car wash?" he screamed. "Me? Working in a car wash?" "Yes," his mother said plainly. "You wash cars for rich people. Hurry up or you'll be late." Raymond stumbled out of the house in disbelief. At the car wash, he was handed a dirty bucket and a sponge. Expensive cars rolled in one after the other. Cars that looked exactly like the one that he used to drive without thinking. As he scrubbed tires and wiped windscreens, something inside him broke. For the first time, Raymond walked with his hands. His head ached, his back burned, his pride shattered into a million pieces. As he watched a black SUV that afternoon, he looked through the tinted glass and saw a man who looked so much like the old man that he slapped on the street. Raymond stood there in disbelief to see how rich the man looked. Immediately, it dawned on him that something extraordinary had definitely happened. Raymond approached the man angrily. "Mr. Man, who are you? And why do you look like the old man that I met last night on the street?" The man slowly turned to look at him as he asked Raymond what he was talking about. Raymond studied his face and realized that he was truly the same person. He began to yell angrily at the man, accusing him of swapping their destinies. "You took my destiny and gave me yours," he said repeatedly as people looked at him confused. Raymond threatened to deal with the man if he failed to return his destiny. "You stole my life and destiny," Raymond yelled out angrily, his voice shaking with rage as the people around stopped to stare. The man, trying not to draw any form of attention to himself, got into his car and motioned for his driver to drive away. Raymond rushed into a yellow tricycle as he chased after the man to his home. To his greatest surprise, Raymond realized that the man now lived in his parents' house. He jumped out of the tricycle and ran into the gate, yelling and calling the man a devil. Raymond caused a scene in the house that the police had to get involved. They arrested him and his poor parents did all that they could to get him out, but nothing they did worked. Raymond spent 3 nights in a police cell, cold, crowded and humiliating. For the first time in his life, no one bowed to him, no one feared him, no one cared who he thought he was. His parents, old and tired, went to the mansion day after day, begging for mercy on behalf of their son. When they were finally allowed to see the man who lived in the mansion, they knelt before him. "Please," Raymond's mother cried. "He's foolish, but he's our only son. Please forgive him." The man looked at them quietly for a long time. Then he began to speak. "I'll drop the charges against your son," he said calmly, "but on one condition." The couple lifted their heads in hope. "For 1 year, Raymond would work in my house as a servant. Only then would I drop the charges and let him go free for what he did. I will pay him well," the man added, "but he must serve and learn under me," he said to the old couple, who left his home and rushed to the police station to see Raymond. When they told him the condition, Raymond laughed bitterly. "Me? A servant? In that man's house?" He scoffed. "Never, Mama. I won't do that. I will never serve a man who took my destiny without my permission," he said to his parents, who looked at him concerned. "My son, you accused him of being evil. You even trespassed into his house, and the man, instead of letting you rot here, he decided to pay you hugely for you to work for him. The pay is way better than the one that you're earning at the car wash at the moment," they said to Raymond, who refused to listen to his parents. "I'd rather die here, Mama, than work for a man who is clearly after my own life," he said to his parents, who advised him to think about it. "We are too poor and old to be going through all this stress," his mother said as tears poured down her face. She pleaded with him once again as they left the station, hopeful that Raymond makes the right decision. That night, whilst Raymond slept, he woke up to find a fellow inmate staring at him in a funny way. Raymond woke up terrified. He asked the young man why he was staring, and the man told him that he liked him. Raymond did not find this funny. He shifted away slowly, his heart pounding, but the inmate only smiled wider and moved closer. "Relax," the man whispered. "We have plenty of time together here." Raymond's throat went dry. That night, sleep refused to come. The cell felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Every sound made his body tense. The inmate hummed softly, then laughed to himself, brushed past Raymond repeatedly as if by accident. Raymond sat up till morning shaking. By dawn, his pride had completely collapsed. He could not spend another night in that cell. When the guards came to call inmates out, Raymond rushed to them. "I agree," he said hurriedly. "I agree to the condition. Please call my parents." His parents arrived later that day. Worry etched deeply into their faces. "Mama," Raymond said quietly, his voice broken, "I will do the job." Tears streamed down his mother's face as she hugged him tightly. "Thank God," she whispered. "Thank God for you, my son." That same evening, the man from the mansion was informed, and within hours the charges were dropped. Raymond was released and transported straight to the mansion. He stepped in, not as an owner, not as an heir, but as a servant. The house felt so different from what he could remember. The walls were different, the furniture different, the staff different, even the air felt different. Raymond was given a room in the mansion with the other servants who slept in the same room with him. He walked around the house, hoping to find anything that he could remember, but everything looked completely different. Even the room that was once his bedroom was now a gym, and Raymond realized in that moment that the life that he thought he knew was in fact not real. So, he had no other option but to work, and this time, he worked in a way that he had never worked before. Raymond woke up before everyone else. He cleaned without being told and listened to every criticism that he got. He watched his boss closely and admired how seriously the man took his work. The man inspected everything himself, spoke calmly, corrected gently, and never raised his voice at anyone, despite how wealthy he was. Raymond had never seen power won with such quiet discipline. His life was a complete blur, as all he could remember was how vile he was to people, the ones that he believed were beneath him, and how lavishly that he spent money that he didn't even make. Now, he didn't know what was real anymore. Those memories haunted him now that he walked in the mansion. Every floor he scrubbed reminded him of the women he once ordered to kneel. Every instruction he followed reminded him of how he once shouted at people who tried to guide him. Every plate he served reminded him of the nights that he wasted spraying money that he never earned. Raymond walked with a broken but willing heart. One afternoon, whilst cleaning his boss's bedroom, he pulled aside a heavy curtain and suddenly froze. On the floor, beside the wardrobe, lay a huge traveling bag. Curiosity got the better of him. He opened it slightly, and his breath caught. Money, bundles upon bundles of crisp notes, neatly arranged, more money than he had ever held in his life. Raymond's heart raced violently. This is my chance, his mind whispered. Just take a little. Start afresh. No one will know. His hands trembled as he reached out. But then another voice spoke within him, calmer and firm. He remembered the cell, the fear, the humiliation, his mother's tears. Slowly, Raymond zipped the bag shut. He cleaned the room thoroughly, adjusted everything carefully, and walked out without touching a single note. That was the moment something truly changed inside of him. Raymond worked diligently. He was punctual, respectful, determined to make something out of his life. He was tired of living this poor life and wanted to go back to his life of riches. His boss noticed how hard he worked and paid him very well. One day, his boss called him aside and asked why he didn't touch the money on that fateful day. You had the chance to run away with it, but still you refused, the man said calmly, looking straight into Raymond's eyes as Raymond swallowed hard. Sir, he replied quietly, I've lost everything once. My life has been a roller coaster and I don't really know what is happening. I don't want to lose what I have now because it can end up being worse. So, I'd rather make use of what I have and make the best out of it, he said to his boss, who nodded slowly and asked Raymond what really happened with his life. Raymond narrated everything to him, how he woke up one morning to realize that he was poor. He narrated to the man that in this other life, his parents were so rich and that they even lived in this mansion. Raymond tried to make sense of it, but till now he could not understand what really happened. All he could remember was slapping the man who looked so much like him. The man looked at him shocked as he advised Raymond not to beat himself up. He told Raymond how closely he had watched him and seen how hard he worked. He then revealed to Raymond that he had a juicy offer for him. Raymond stood there stunned as his boss offered him a better position. Raymond, would you like to become my personal assistant? He asked Raymond, who froze as he nodded his head. Sir, I would love to, he said to his boss, who revealed to him that his salary would be increased. Raymond was now going to earn 5 times of the salary that he currently earned. He will work directly with me and learn how this business truly works, he said to Raymond, whose eyes were now filled with tears as he thanked his boss for believing in him. His boss smiled faintly as he began to speak in a very cool tone. I didn't give you a second chance, he said. You earned it with your diligence and hard work, he said to Raymond, who smiled ear to ear as he asked for permission to visit his parents. That evening, Raymond left the mansion earlier than usual. He rushed home, and when he told his parents the news, his mother screamed out in joy. His father lifted his hands to the heavens as he thanked God for finally answering their prayers. For the first time in his life, Raymond felt proud, not because of the money, but because finally he felt a form of fulfillment that he had never felt before. Weeks turned into months, and Raymond was finally able to afford a better house for his parents. He moved them into a 2-bedroom apartment and even got himself a car. His life began to transform in a way that he never imagined, until one evening, when his boss called him, his voice unusually cold and sharp. Raymond, the man said over the phone, there's a very serious matter on my desk right now. Raymond's heart skipped. You have been accused of something grave, something that can destroy everything you have worked so hard to build here. I can't believe this, he said to Raymond, whose palms instantly became sweaty. Sir, I don't understand, he stammered. What did I do? He asked his boss, who informed him that he had only 30 minutes to arrive at the mansion. The line went dead as Raymond stood frozen, his phone pressed to his ear as his mind began to race. Had someone accused him of stealing? Had they found something against him? Raymond thought to himself as fear almost made his heart to stop. He grabbed his car keys and rushed out of the house, weaving his way through traffic as he drove quickly to the mansion. Minutes later, he arrived at the house and met his boss, who informed him that the company's records shows a huge amount of money that was moved into his account a few weeks ago. Raymond stood there stunned as he tried to understand what was happening. He stood there as the sound of sirens began to fill the entire place. His heart raced as he tried to convince his boss that he had nothing to do with the money, when suddenly a group of officers walked into the mansion with his parents. Raymond could not believe his eyes. He tried to understand what was happening as his mother walked up to his boss and congratulated him for a work well done. It was in that moment that Raymond realized that everything was staged. His parents were never poor, and the man who he believed was his boss was only paid to act the part. The mansion still belonged to his parents, who transformed everything in it to confuse him. That night, when Raymond slapped the old man by the roadside, his parents had him followed as they got to know about the man. His mother came up with the plan as she decided to use the same man to divert his suspicions. For months, they watched Raymond transform and decided to test him with the bag of money. They wanted to see if he has changed for real or just fear masked as humility. So when Raymond zipped the bag shut and walked away from it, his parents knew that their plan had worked. The man, who had acted as his boss, cleared his throat and stepped aside. "My work here is done," he said calmly as he revealed to them that their son passed the final test. Raymond's legs gave way. He stood there frozen, his hands shaking as his chest rose and fell as if he had just run for his life. "So this while, you are watching me?" His father nodded as he began to speak. "We are watching you wake up," he said gently as his mother stepped closer, her eyes filled with tears. "My son, you were alive, but you were not living," she said. "You thought money would raise you, but money does not raise children. Discipline does." Raymond covered his face and broke down. "I was wicked," he sobbed. "I was useless, mother. I treated people like nothing. But now, I know that nothing with value comes without effort." His father placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "The life you thought was taken from you was never stolen. It was only paused until you became worthy of it." Raymond nodded slowly as he burst out in tears, realizing that his life was not an illusion. From that day onward, nothing was handed to him again. Even though his parents returned access to the family wealth, Raymond chose to keep working. He kept his job. He kept waking early. He kept serving with humility. He used his earnings to build himself, not to impress others, and learned his lessons the hard way, that life rewards effort and not excuses. Raymond ended up apologizing to the man who later taught him a lesson that changed his life forever. The lesson to be learned from this story is that parents should bring up a child in a way that builds character and not comfort and entitlement. When everything is handed to a child, growth is delayed and arrogance is born. But when discipline, boundaries and accountability are taught, humility and purpose follow. This story teaches that wealth without values ruins a person, whilst effort gives life meaning, and no one is truly successful until they can stand on their own. Parents may love their children deeply, but true love prepares a child for life, not dependency on it.